Well, welcome to The Journey. My name is Kevin Polky, and I am the host of The Journey. And we have a special guest with us today, Laura Kane from Marshmallow's Hope. And Laura has been with us, has been on the show before, and she's told her story. And I think Laura, the last time that you were on on the show is right after you had, well, I think you've been on twice. I think it was right after you released a book, your first book, and then last year I had you on during Suicide Awareness Month, and so this may, I think this is actually your third time being on the show. So
Yeah, thank you for having me back.
yeah, well, thank you, and I know you. Marshmallows has now evolved. How long has Marshmallows been in existence?
So a little over 2 years. We just had our 2 year anniversary in September.
Gotcha. And I know that there has definitely been some things that have evolved just specifically in the last couple months. Some new opportunities that have happened and some new funding that has gone through. But before we get into all that, maybe just kind of share with the listeners a little bit about Zachary, a little bit about what life was like. A few years ago, and then what happened, and then kind of bring us up to speed where we're at today.
Absolutely. So my son Zachary passed away in 2018. And prior to that, for over a decade, I had been a single mom of three amazing kids. I was proud of where we were in life. I was in sales. My career was thriving. I had just bought my dream home. And so life was good. But then, unfortunately, September 16th of 2018, my 14-year-old son ended his own life by suicide. And I can tell you that ever since, like, my entire life has shifted. I'm not the person who I used to be. And so, yeah, I mean, it changed me as an individual, and it changed my path. My life is totally different of where I was prior to.
Yeah. And you and I've had this conversation numerous times and have talked about the ripple effect when someone dies by suicide, that there's such a ripple effect. And there's always going to be a ripple effect when a child dies, right? Just from the simple aspect of that. It's so counterintuitive. We're supposed to our children are supposed to outlive us. And so that is one thing. But with any with any age, when someone dies by suicide, there's so many unknowns, that are only known by the person who dies, in spite of all the clues that we can try to piece together. So when you say that there was definitely a Laura before and now a Laura since, or a Laura after, I know that to be true, not just with yourself, as I know your story, quite well over the years, but other people as well. So, I know that you have a couple pictures behind you that are likings of Zachary, um,
Mhm.
and though those were of the videos that I've seen and of the pictures you've shown me, that smile is definitely one of the things that stands out to me. Besides flipping and doing doing gymnastic tricks, it seems to be one of the things that is implanted in my memory, in my thought process of who Zachary is.
Yeah, I mean, out of the three kids, not that I would have ever in a million years imagined any of them dying before me, right? As you stated, but out of my three children, he was honestly like who, in that smile, that's who he was. He was always, always happy, always wanted to make others smile and laugh, bring people up when they were down. He just was truly, what I saw was a truly happy individual.
Mhm.
And so when this happened, it completely shocked me. And you're right, suicide, and it left me behind with so many like whys, what ifs, should haves, right? And over the years, I've had to really work on letting go of those things, because if not, it mentally wears me down. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult journey for sure.
So one of the things that as you describe Zachary as being someone who was seemed to be happy, seemed to always want to help other people, wanted to make other people happy. Some of the listeners may, go, well, then why would he? Well, what would have happened to bring him to a dark place? And so I know that as we get into start talking about marshmallows, maybe from what you piece together now regarding Zachary, and then we'll move into the Zacharys of the world, the Zows. What maybe kind of give us a little bit of insight of what you've now looking back on it, because our ability to see things from looking backwards is usually much greater than when we're in the moment itself. So maybe some insights that you've thought or discovered or theorized why Zachary found himself in that darkness.
Well, since this happened to me and trying to get the answers that I know I'll never definitively will have, right? I went back to school and I began to educate myself on this topic. And what I have found is that first of all, education is the key to prevention. I wasn't educated in this topic or like the red flag signs, the risk factors of suicide. But I can tell you that now, having gone through this, I can check off all of the red flag signs, even though I saw this happy individual, right? Towards the end of his life, he was starting to withdraw from his friends and from his family. And I attributed that to he's just a normal teenager going through, normal teenage angst. He started, um, yeah, he started losing interest in the things that he loved towards like the last couple of weeks of his lifetime. So, for example, he loved to play the piano. He taught himself how to play the piano. And I mean, this kid would play 24/7. Well, the last couple of weeks, he kind of had stepped away from the piano altogether. And that's one of the risk factors. That's one of the red flag signs is that they lose interest on the things that they normally would love to do. So I can check off all the red flag signs, and I didn't know. So now I fight for educating parents,
Mhm.
um, about these things because maybe my story would be different had I been educated. And the other risk factor, the other thing that I think contributed to it was that we did have a history of trauma in our lives. I was a domestic violence survivor, even though I left Zach's father when, the kids were little, all of that trauma, I think, played a part in it as well.
Mhm.
So, there are definitely things that now that I've been educated in this topic, I can, factor into why he would have made the decision that he did. Will I ever truly know? Absolutely not. But I can tell you that from statistics and just an educational point of view, I can definitely pinpoint those things.
Sure, sure. And so that's, yeah, and in the midst of your own grief, in the midst of trying to heal and try to your own recovery post Zachary's death in September of 18, Marshmallow's hope started. So maybe give us just a little bit of background about how that started, and or and why did it start, and what is it doing now?
Yeah, so prior to this happening to me, Kevin, like I never knew anybody who had died by suicide, and I had never met any family who had lost a loved one to suicide. And during COVID, in the middle of like my own grieving and my darkest moments, I began to hear about more youth suicides around our nation. And I felt very compelled, like, I need to do something. This can't be happening to other families. And so I started initially posting motivational messages on Zachary's social media, on his Snapchat, just encouraging kids to keep going, not give up. I would say things like I would post kind of a goofy picture with like the Snapchat filters of myself and saying to kids, if you're seeing this and you're having thoughts of suicide, this is a sign that you need to keep living. And so kids actually started responding to my snaps and opening up to me about their own struggles and their own thoughts of suicide, their own thoughts or battles with depression. And I then took it a step further and started picking up kids, taking them out to eat, just spending one-on-one time with them, going bowling, going disc golfing. We couldn't do a lot during the pandemic, but I got to just do one-on-one individual activities with them. And when I saw that this was having a really positive impact on these kids, I thought, why not make this a thing? And then I started to research, how do I open a 501c3? And that's how Marshmallows was truly born.
Hmm.
And so, I then thought about Zach. And so Zachary had a big brother in his life. We had him when he was about 10 years old. I had put him, since he was growing up without a dad, I had signed him up for a program called Big Brothers, Big Sisters here in the Rockford community. And Zach had been on this wait list for 2 years. Well, he had finally gotten called, or we had gotten called that there was a match 2 years later. And so we were super excited. He met this gentleman who's actually now the president of Marshmallow's Hope. His name is Rich Foster. And they hung out for maybe about a month. And then we got this devastating letter saying, due to lack of funding, the Big Brothers Big Sisters program is closing. Please cease all contact. And so, anyway, we decided they would continue their relationship. And when I thought about Marshmallow's Hope, I wanted to do something that modeled that relationship. And then I thought, you know what? Wait a minute. Like that's what I'm already doing for these kids. And so the main program of the organization is called Hero Mentors, but it's just a one-on-one mentorship program for kids 9 to 19 who are living with these mental emotional illnesses, victims of child abuse, post-traumatic stress, suicidal ideations. But really, that's how that all came about. And now, in gaining education, so later on during COVID, one of my personal mentors ended up losing his Marine son, or I'm sorry, her Marine son to suicide. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks all over again. It was as if I had lost my own child, and I had never experienced that type of pain for somebody else, but I was devastated when I found that out. And I thought, all right, the veteran community, it's known that they are very high risk for suicide. What can we do?
Right.
And actually, with school and actually from you, I began to educate myself about protective factors. What can we do to put as many protective factors in place for people who are struggling? And if you want to define a protective factor for people, maybe we should do that in case they don't know what it is.
That's a great point. Yes. And so when probably the simplest thing, right? And this, and especially like with a pandemic, if it's taught us nothing else, it's taught us that we can't control all the stress factors or all the factors that are out there that are going to put stress into our life. Or when we talk about someone who's at risk of suicide, we talk about risk factors. It could be, being a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence or struggling with an eating disorder or financial instability or some type of mental illness that is activated. These are all what we would consider risk factors. And even though we can educate ourselves and be aware of those risk factors and we can start treating those risk factors, the research is pretty clear that the person who has the highest ratio of protective factors is least likely to complete suicide or in that way even attempt suicide. It's really the protective factors is really the more protective factors that individual has. And so what is a protective factor? Protective factor would be something that that person knows, or a person knows, that they can't do anything to themselves because of the impact it would have on that protective factor. So like an example maybe is a family pet, maybe a protective factor that they would a person would say, I'm suicidal. I don't want to live anymore, but I know that Charlie, the cat, needs me to take care of him, and I wouldn't want anything to happen to Charlie. So even though they may not necessarily see value in their own life because of the darkness, because of the pain they're in, they know that Charlie's life is valuable to them, and so they'll stay alive to take care of Charlie. And so that would be an example, or it could be a faith group, or it could be a circle of friends, it could be a purpose or a sense at within a vocation, or a volunteering, or good friends. The so and the reason why we want people to have multiple protective factors is because we know in the midst of all those things that I described are relational, and we know that in relationships, for them to be authentic and genuine, there also then is a risk for conflict, because to be authentic and genuine means that you have to have honest conversations, and sometimes honest conversations lead to not seeing things exactly the same. And so that's why it's important for them to have multiple protective factors, so that they aren't reliant just on one. In other words, if Charlie's getting older, the cat Charlie's getting older, and we know that the person is saying that the only reason why they're alive is because of Charlie, then we know that at some point we need to get Charlie a playmate. We need to get another dog or a cat, another animal, because we don't want everything to be based on Charlie, because the odds are the person's going to outlive the pet. I guess unless it's like a turtle or something. So we want to make sure that protected that there's more than one protective factor that the person has become aware of and surrounded themselves with. Anything you
Yeah,
want to add to that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, just, protective factors mitigate the risk of suicide. And that's really what I focus on. That's what I've learned through my studies, through you. And so that's, when I was thinking about, how do I help the veteran population? How do we put those protective factors in place for these guys to help mitigate that risk? Then I thought, you know what, we're already doing it. We have the Hero Mentor Program. Why not take these guys who are part of a high risk adult population and pair them up with what we call the Zows, the Zacharys of the world, these kids who are struggling. And so that's really how we developed the Hero Mentor Program. And that led us to Edwards Air Force Base, where we currently run the Hero program for active duty airmen, because we realize that, active duty service members, veterans, and first responders, they're all part of an at-risk adult population that has a higher likelihood of ending their own life by suicide. And so we just really want to be that light in their darkness, and put these protective factors in place through the Hero program. So by them mentoring a child who they know is already at risk, we don't assess the adults, so we don't know if the adults are thinking about suicide, right? But what we're hoping to do, is that by them knowing that they are mentoring a child who is at risk, that we're giving them that protective factor. If they do get into that darkness, they're less likely to end their own life, because they don't want this kid looking up to them to do the same thing.
Right.
And so we've also combined the program with counseling services, and that's where the Winnebago County funding that we just currently received comes into play. But I don't know if you want me to go into that yet.
Yeah, and you said, and I just for the listeners to in case somebody has a teenager who may be struggling, or knows somebody who has a teenager that's struggling, and they would want to get involved with the programming. When the mentors, though, even though you're not continually screening the mentors, there is a screening process and an application process that they go through, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So they go through resilience training. And what we actually do through our resilience training, well, first, everybody goes through a criminal background. We have to make sure that we're placing kids with adults who are safe, right? According to the criminal background. So we don't accept anybody, unfortunately, that has any sort of criminal activity in their background. And so, anyways, we then put them through a resilience training. And the first thing that we say in our resilience training is, how do you know if you're fit to be a mentor? And then we talk about, if you see these signs within yourself, then you may not be fit to be a mentor. And we talk about, again, we take them through like the risk factor, red flag signs of suicide to let them know that, hey, it's okay for you not to be okay, but if you are feeling this way, these are the resources we have available for you. And we're not saying that you can't mentor in the future, but right now this would be the best route, is to get you the help that you need before you're fit to become a mentor. And so that's what we do through the training, is we try to plant those seeds in these guys' minds, to make sure that if they do see something within themselves, that we give them access to reaching out before we pair them up with a child. So,
Thank you.
um,
And so kind of moving into the piece that you talked about regarding, um, obviously a natural aspect of the mentor program would be, doing referring for counseling, because we already know that the ZOWs are at risk. And so that it's a natural, that there's going to be potentially needed more than just mentoring, that the adolescent would need more than that. So then you'd be referring out for counseling. But but tell us a little bit about what roadblocks you were running into, over the last couple of years, as you got more and more involved with the mentoring program. What roadblocks or gaps did you notice within the Rockford community?
well, unfortunately, we were running into extensive wait lists. So oftentimes, kids that were being referred to us, they had already attempted suicide, and they were coming out of, an emergency visit at Swedish American Hospital, or now UW. And when they would come to our program, we at the time we have great partnerships that we've built in the community, but because of the need, because of the high demand, that the pandemic created, we were running into these extensive wait lists. And a couple of times, or a couple of instances, we had kids who, to give you an example, like we had one that attempted in December, and then they couldn't find counseling services, outpatient treatment of any kind, until 3 months later, until March. And then again, it was happening. We had a child who attempted in March, and he couldn't get counseling services until June. So when you think about that time frame, right, like 90 days to have to wait, when you're in that crisis situation, it's deadly. It's a deadly combination. We're setting these kids up for failure, and we are potentially going to have them attempt again, right? And possibly succeed. So we wanted to really um, create a program where we didn't have to go through that. And so we were able to actually utilize, interns through KP counseling, which we were super grateful for, to help us get these kids in treatment. But what we really wanted was to get funding so that we could contract our own licensed counselors, through Marshmallow's Hope, and completely bypass those wait lists.
Okay. And so through a series of like many things, right? When we look at funding, it starts and stops, and celebration and heartache and all those things. It's all part of this, and especially because Marshmallows is such a young program, that also has its own stumbling blocks, from a standpoint of who is competing for those funding. But you were granted, a you know a breakthrough amount of money, to change really change Marshmallows just recently, and now you're able to not only yourself to be on staff and you actually get paid, and then to have a part-time, is it a part-time assistant or
Hmm.
part-time assistant,
Yep.
and then as well as being able to uh, pay for 40 hours a week of licensed counselors to be available. So that's huge. That's a huge thing. um, I know that as you've experienced, as we've been walking through this, uh, there has been still stumbling blocks, right? Still things that we learn because it's a startup, and these are all things that we learn. What things would you say, Laura, have you learned about? What have you learned about yourself that you wouldn't have learned in the last, let's say, just last 2 months? What things have you learned about yourself that you wouldn't have learned if, on one hand, this opportunity has happened because of the funding, but then there's still there's still all the logistics of how do we get this thing actually off the ground?
Um, well, so I never realized how dedicated I truly, like how dedicated of an individual. I was never that way, I guess, prior to Zach,
Mm.
passing away. Like I was always, I feel like, even though I had a good career and stuff, like I was this, I don't know, unorganized, chaotic individual. And then now, in the last couple of months, really, I think the resilience and the fact that this is personal, right? But um, I don't know. I've learned that, first of all, working with other individuals in my community is only going to continue to make us stronger. Like that's the biggest thing, right? I can't do this alone. Sure, I can have the vision and I can have the want, but it really takes a village to come together and make things like this happen. So that's beautiful, and that's, I guess, something that, um, I don't know. I'm growing. I'm growing with the organization. I'm growing as an individual with this, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. And I think if you were able to have an honest conversation with any entrepreneur, they would tell you, depending on how far along they are with their project or their initiative or whatever they're doing, they would tell you that similar to parenting, you grow as much from the experience as you help the initiative or the business or whatever it is grow. And that's just a synergistic embiotic experience that ends up happening, because no matter how many times I've done something as far as entrepreneurial, um, it's never the same thing twice, and there's always things to learn. And I would wish, I would think I would think that you would go, yeah, well, now I know what to do, and I know what I've done in the past with other things, but every time is a new opportunity, to grow, to learn, and sometimes that can be frustrating, and other times, it's good because it still equates to growth. So you have an event coming up here in a couple weeks. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about, you have an annual fundraiser that helps support what you're doing, because the funding that you received is allocated for some very specific things, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be enough to sustain it alone. So tell us a little bit about this event you have coming up.
Yeah, so November 12th, we have our second annual Marshmallows Hope Gala. And what it is, first of all, like a celebration, right? We want to always come together and celebrate the lives that we have impacted and the lives that we have helped as an organization. But yes, it's very much a fundraiser, because you're right. Like the funding that we received is allocated for salaries, for very specific things to allow us to run the program. But we still have, to come up with funding for our insurance, for the mentorship program for just different needs. One of the things that we do through Marshmallows is we uplift or we promote self-esteem. And the first kid I ever mentored, when I asked him, why do you want to die? He literally told me, my haircut isn't good enough, my clothes aren't good enough. And as an adult, you sit back and you think, that's not something worth dying over, right? But it's very real for these kids. And so one of the things that we do is we actually promote self-esteem by paying for haircuts, paying for school clothes, paying for dental braces. And so we need to continue raising funds to be able to continue to do these things. And so that's what the gala is all about. It's to celebrate the lives that we impact, but also to help us raise those funds. And so we definitely hope that you would be willing to come out and support. If you're listening, tickets are available on our website. And so, yeah, we need all the support we can get.
Perfect. And so with that, the website is, why don't you give us the website and the best way for people to get a hold of you, either regarding the event or getting a hold of you to either become a mentor for Marshmallows or maybe make a referral to Marshmallows. Yeah, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So it is marshmallowshope.org, and marshmallows is spelled just like the food, Marshmallows, hope, HOPE.org. You can get a hold of me either on the website. My email is listed on there, Laura@marshmallowshope.org, or my cell phone, 847-754-5770, which is the main line for Marshmallows. If you wanted to apply for the Hero Mentor Program, to become a mentor, you would fill out the application online. So literally everything that you need to know about Marshmallows is on our website. And one thing I want to mention too, the gala, Kevin Polky is actually our keynote speaker. So we're super excited to have you, and we're so grateful for everything you have done to help Marshmallows, Kevin, sincerely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I'm looking forward to being there. And Diane and I were just talking about it over the weekend, and we're looking forward to the event and obviously the opportunity to support Marshmallows and share a little bit more with your audience that is there about my partnership and Shatter Our Silence's partnership and KP's partnership with Marshmallows and what you are attempting to do from your part of it, how to make a difference within our community. And I think that is probably the biggest thing, that regardless if it's Shatter Our Silence, which is focused on awareness and education, or the Liam Foundation, which is focused primarily with the LGBTQ population, or what the Tommy Corral Foundation is doing, regarding her group, regarding the different support groups that they're doing and partnering with NAMI. There is more than enough people that are hurting right now, and all these different ways that we can be able to have resources and be a light in others' darkness is really the key to this. No one group in itself is going to be able to do everything, and we know that at KP, that it's more than counseling. It's also being involved with other types of support, because each one of those groups can lead to being a protective factor, that to be a resource for our adults as well as our youth. So Laura, I appreciate everything that you do. I know that it is not by any stretch of the imagination easy, though I know you have shared many stories of why it's rewarding. It's not easy walking your own journey while you're there, being available to help people on their journey. And so I appreciate everything that you do for our youth and for the adults in our community, as well as what you do for me and for KP and SOS as well. So again, thank you for being on the show again, and we will definitely have you on a fourth and fifth time in the future. And I will include in the show notes all your contact information for anybody who wants to not only go to the event on November 12th, but also be able to get in contact with you. So thank you again, Laura, for being with us.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a great day.
Okay. So, for anyone who's listening to this,
Mhm.
if there is somebody who you think needs to hear about what Laura's doing with marshmallows, or you would want yourself to get involved, or would you like to go to the event on the 12th at the Lombardi Club, definitely check out her website. I will again have that in the show notes. It's www.marshmallowshope.org. All right. Thank you again for being here, and I look forward to being with you next week.